Hello, hello. Hey, David. What's up, State Fishing? Peda Mio. This is weird. I had to start the I had to start the stream and come out from backstage when I saw this. It says I'm unsubscribed. Was wondering why I didn't get a notification. That sucks. I'm not surprised. I know that YouTube has had a problem with unsubscribing people before, especially from socialist or communist accounts. It's happened to me before as well, like with people that I'm subscribed to. Um, One sec. Um, so yeah, that stinks. I'm trying to look right now and see if we've had any. Yeah, we just had a dip in subscribers too. So it looks like they just purged some subscribers from us. And I believe that they say they're purging like bot accounts, but then they always target socialist, left wing, anti imperialist accounts. So go figure. Go figure. Crazy how that works when all the tech companies are owned by Silicon Valley oligarchs. Hey, comrades. Hello. Yep, resubbed and hit the notification bell. You rock. Yes, thank you. Hit the notification bell. Um, Resubscribe. And then I guess my only other advice would be subscribe to us on multiple places. We have our Twitch, we have our YouTube, we have our TikTok, we have our website, and we have our Twitter, we have our Instagram, we have Rumble now. We recently started on Rumble, so I'll pull that up actually. This will now have pretty much all of our TikToks and our YouTube videos on it. So if you want to make sure you're always following us, follow on Rumble because it is like more their owner said like the mission of the website is to be more friendly towards free speech and stuff like that. So plus I can, you can still monetize content and stuff. So if people start watching us on Rumble, it'll be another income source for Midwestern Marks, siphoning money away from those advertisers and whatnot. Um, so yeah, Rumble's cool. Follow us there. Um, yeah, and everywhere else. All right, I'm going to use my Stream Deck to tell everyone to like, comment, share, subscribe. Check this out. It's just the touch of a button. Boom. Oh, it didn't work. The Twitch one worked. I don't know why the YouTube one didn't work. That's weird. Oh well. Maybe it's because my YouTube's open. I need to close it. Let's try it now. Still didn't work. Oh well. Either way, still pretty cool. Thoughts on non-compete's video on patriotic socialists? I haven't seen it. He's an anarchist, right? Maybe I'll watch it. No, not ever in life has Eddie been better. That's facts. Never once in all my years have I been better than I am today. Better every day, baby. Hello, fellow comrades. Hello, Jigum. Hey, your live stream the other day helped me debate my dad on how Russia is not communist. Very cool. I'm glad we could help with that. Yeah, I guess it's important to understand that Russia is not communist, right, anymore. They are not the Soviet Union. That was dissolved. But after it was dissolved, their country underwent neoliberal shock therapy. Their state-run industries were sold off to Western multinationals for pennies. Their social safety nets were dismantled. The welfare programs and state employment programs that people had come to depend on. So it was, a human rights and economic disaster for the people. Oh, my hair's going crazy. By every measure, you had like massive rates of unemployment, um, poverty going up, homelessness going up, drug and sex trafficking going up, things like this. So what Putin has done is nationalize a lot of energy companies, expand Russia's power as an energy producer and as an exporter of oil, natural gas, and resources like that, making a lot of European countries fairly dependent on Russian energy, which the U.S. doesn't like at all. The U.S. doesn't like any country being a major energy producer, and redistributing, those profits, that surplus value in their people or in their own infrastructure and in their productive capacity, the way that Russia has been doing. So that's why you see a huge turn now, with NATO and the Western imperialists towards Russia and trying to destabilize Russia in the Putin administration. But that doesn't mean Russia's communist, right? That doesn't mean Russia's a socialist or communist country. Um, so we should understand things for what they are, and conservative people or older people believing that Russia's a communist country is a bulwark to understanding um, understanding the truth of the matter, which is why it's such a big propaganda point, even though it seems ridiculous. What the heck is a non-compete? Never mind, it'll probably just annoy me. Do you think Russia's version of NATO is a good thing? I won't say yes or no to that. I mean, military alliances between the anti-imperialist countries are a necessity. I don't know if it's, good to put a moral judgment on that, whether it's good or bad, because obviously we'd prefer that they didn't need to do that, but yeah. So I wanted to start today. The first thing I wanted to cover today, some of you know, I've been working on starting a CPUSA chapter in my area. We have our second or third meeting tonight, like our second official meeting, third unofficially. And we're going to plan out our first organizing event. So one of the things that CPUSA tells you to do when you're starting a chapter or a club is to read their manual from 1935. Their manual from a time when they had close to 1 million members or over 1 million members in the party. They were very active. They were influential within the trade unions, influential within a lot of the organs of worker power. And this party program is meant to answer a lot of the practical questions of organizing, right? What should you do when you're actually on the ground, actually forming a chapter or a club and trying to strengthen worker organizations, strengthen organs of worker power, class power, and political power, build relations with the community, things like that. This is not a step-by-step guide, but definitely a roadmap, and something that uses theory and uses very classic, easy to understand, simple theory to answer a lot of very basic questions about organizing. And I think if people would read this, and allow themselves to learn through the struggle, as the CPUSA manual instructs, I think it would answer a lot of questions and a lot of sort of circular, never-ending debates that go on Twitter, which are often highly abstract and highly theoretical, without thinking about things when applied in reality, like thinking about the practical questions of organizing. So that's part of why I like this a lot, and this is, I think, a really good example. So we're talking a lot lately about who we can organize, who we can't organize. Are Trump supporters all evil fascists, a basket of deplorables who we shouldn't organize at all because they're all simply too racist and bigoted? Or should we totally embrace the Trump supporters and do hashtag MAGA communism? But But if you read the manual here, I think what matters a lot more than the political leanings of the workers or of the masses, especially when it comes to the American political circus. What matters a lot more than that is their class position, right? There are oligarchic Trump supporters and very wealthy Trump supporters who would never support socialism. And there are Trump supporters who are poor farmers or who are of the proletariat, of the working class. Um, there are ones who are poor agricultural workers. But there are also a lot of Biden supporters in these various class positions, right? There are a lot of Bernie supporters among the farmers and among the organized working class, the trade unions, because they wanted things like single payer health care. And we should reach out to all these people and reach out to them based on their class position. Yeah, we can take their political position and their political leanings into account for sure. You have to when you're having conversations with people. But what matters the most is their class position and if they're willing to help the struggle of the working class. So when the 1935 manual here is going through allies of the working class, they say poor and small farmers. They say black people who are double oppressed by systemic racism that results from capitalism, and exploited and oppressed by capitalism, like the rest of the working class. International solidarity, having solidarity with countries who the U.S. empire is oppressing and exploiting. Solidarity with countries who are trying to build socialism in the face of that, like Cuba and China. The proletariat of these countries are our allies as well. The petty bourgeoisie, small business owners, or what you call maybe middle class people who are willing to lend their support to the revolution and lend their support to the working class, either material, ideological, political. Those are people who can be allied with. And like I said, there's a lot of petty bourgeois Trump supporters, right? Trump captured a lot of the petty bourgeoisie. The class makeup of many of the people who were there at the Capitol riots were petty bourgeois, along with a lot of super far right-wing fascist groups that the CIA has funded, like the Falun Gong and some Iranian monarchists, Venezuelan and Cuban far right-wingers. But anyways, anybody can be organized so long as they're willing to aid in the class struggle. All right, so don't dismiss people based on their politics, and don't, structure your entire organizing strategy around American electoral politics. Reach people by class and reach people based on the issues that affect all these classes: poor and small farmers, minority groups, the international proletariat, the petty bourgeoisie. And this just means fighting for the working class in any way, and also fighting imperialism, being anti-imperialist and pro-proletariat. What am I trying to do here? I lost my mouse. So yeah, I really like that manual. I recommend anybody read it, honestly. It is good stuff. I also really like the stuff about union organizing and how to wage the ideological struggle within unions, to actually push for socialism and against reformism and just pure trade unionism, but also, be a convicted trade unionist. And any communist should understand what the trade unions are advocating, what's going on with the trade unions and the workers within it, what the rank and file thinks, what the administrators think, the differences between the two. And this is stuff that we hardly ever talk about. We spend a lot of time debating things on Twitter and whatnot, but other than, a few really good outlets, we don't spend enough time talking about what the unions are doing and what the organs of class power are doing. And politics is local as well. This is a really good point that the Revolutionary Blackout Network, RBN, makes a lot, that, politics and who you're going to organize largely depends on, what's going on locally and the class position of the people around you. So where was I going with that? I can't remember. But yeah. Howdy, comrade. Howdy. Sup, fascist? How's your Marxism day going, sweet ears? Traitor, if America goes into declared war. Treasonous. Am I treasonous because I didn't want to invade Iraq? Okay, what else did I want to cover? Okay. I need to get some water first before I cover this. Next story, because I'm dying of thirst. I'll pull up the wrestling match I tried to pull up the other day, but I was unable to. Oh, that's not what I want. Sorry, y'all, I messed up. Here we go. I can't just leave people with nothing to watch during the intermission. Well, this video wasn't loading the other day, though. I wonder if it's not going to load again. Dang it. Oh well, I'll play this one I've played a million times. Hopefully we've got some new viewers in the audience today who haven't seen this before. BRB.
Red zone.
Oh, how am I doing? Am I winning? Did I win yet? Close to it. Well, I gained viewers while this was going on. I'm glad that happened. I guess people like watching that. Welcome to the sport of wrestling. You should reach out to Haas. We've talked before. Freestyle or Greco? That was Greco. Greco-Roman. Alright. I'm torn on which one to cover next, y'all. I'm honestly torn because there were a lot of good stories that I had today. I'm probably gonna do this one first. Yeah. So this was an article from the Gray Zone called Zelensky and NATO plan to transform post-war Ukraine into a big Israel. Which, if you don't know, Israel at this point is a fascist state. It has been labeled as an apartheid state by the United Nations. They they were created by a combination of U.S. corporate influences, British corporate influences, as well as political influences. U.S. funding and arming for Israel really picked up in the 1960s, though, as they basically tried to create, this imperialist proxy state on top of another existing state or another existing people, and the Palestinian people. And now Israel is consistently used to launch attacks all around the region at countries like Lebanon, Syria, and Iran, when those countries defy the economic wishes of the West, which are consistent with the economic interests of Israel, because Western economic interests created Israel largely. U.S. taxpayer dollars go towards giving Israel more than $3 billion a year, a number which was increased under both Trump and Biden, is increased by pretty much every president. Israel has very lucrative deals with American weapons contractors who sell them high grade, military grade weapons to both enforce apartheid on Palestinians, while claiming they're being attacked by Palestinians who are armed with literally high-powered fireworks oftentimes, and also carry out the U.S.'s geopolitical interests in the Middle East, as we said before. Hugo Chavez has called Colombia, a country with a huge U.S. military presence, consistently used to attack Venezuela and support U.S. economic and geopolitical interests in Latin America. Hugo Chavez has called Colombia the Israel of Latin America. Did I say that already? I think I said that before I went into my ramble. But either way, another country that's been compared to Israel is Honduras. Of course, Colombia just had the Gustavo Petro, who was elected and is trying to change a lot of Colombia's policies towards the U.S. military and towards Venezuela. Same with Honduras with the election of Xiomara Castro, a Democratic Socialist candidate. But for a long time, Honduras was used to launch regime change efforts into Nicaragua at the Sandinista Revolution. So by NATO and Zelensky and various imperialist think tanks, as we're going to go over later, saying that they want to transform Ukraine into a big Israel, they basically mean a far right-wing state that acts fascistically as an apartheid state pretty much internally, while carrying out NATO and the U.S.'s imperialist interests externally, using Ukraine as a way to launch regime change efforts into Russia, and basically making Ukraine a country that's constantly waging this NATO proxy war against Russia, which would be, of course, disastrous for everyone involved and a total money drain for U.S. taxpayers, which will again just go towards enriching weapons contractors. And people say the gray zone, they're just conspiracy theorists. They just draw conclusions from things without having any proof to always be anti-US. They're just being paid by the Russians or whatever. But this is from the Atlantic Council, which is basically the voice of American weapons contractors, corporations who produce weapons and whose most of their sales come from the American military and the American government. The Atlantic Council is deeply connected to them. Their board is made up of weapons contractors and people on the boards of various weapons manufacturers, former State Department officials, former intelligence operatives, things like that. So the Atlantic Council is always on the cutting edge of what the Western finance capitalists and their empire want to do. So they publish this themselves. Zelensky wants Ukraine to be a big Israel. Here's a roadmap. So not only is he saying that he wants Ukraine to be a big Israel, a country which just constantly takes military funding from the U.S. and gets weapons from the U.S., a constant source of enrichment for the military-industrial complex, which is constantly attacking the U.S.'s enemies around the world. Not only is Zelensky saying that's what he wants his own country to be after the U.S. was highly involved with bringing Zelensky to power, but now these weapons contractors are saying, here's a roadmap. Here's how we're actually going to go about it. Here's our plan to turn Ukraine into a big Israel. And you wonder why people wonder why Russia has, says they have security interests here, and say that NATO expansionism and U.S. expansionism and U.S. destabilization efforts and meddling in Ukraine threatens Russian security, when the Ukrainian president and the most powerful, influential American think tanks are saying that they want to turn Ukraine into a big Israel so that the U.S. can constantly wage a proxy war against Russia. Yeah, of course that's a security concern. Of course, not just Putin, but the Russian people are going to be worried about that, especially the people of the Donbass, right? People who are majority Russian speaking, where thousands of civilians have been killed by the Ukrainian militias and Ukrainian military since the U.S. helped right-wing governments come to power in the Euromaidan coup. They've watched what Israel has done to the Palestinian people. Right? They've watched Israel enforce apartheid and constantly kill people and kill women and children, and enforce policies of settler colonialism, forcing people out of their homes. Is that what Zelensky's referring to when he says he wants to turn Ukraine into a big Israel? Probably. He's probably referring to both the apartheid that's enforced, the violent apartheid that's enforced, and the fact that Israel serves as an imperial outpost for the U.S. in the Middle East. So, scary stuff, but nothing new. We knew this was their plan. This has been their plan all along. And this is something that Bernie and AOC and probably Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and all these other socialists in Congress, all these other leftists are going to cheer right along. Say, yes, send more money. Send more money and support to NATO and to the Ukrainian military. Just like Bernie cheered on the NATO bombings and the NATO dismantling of Yugoslavia, which was, a NATO expansion towards Russia's borders, which was a major factor in bringing us to where we are today. And now Yugoslavia and Kosovo are the place where there are more NATO troops, where NATO is occupying more so than any other place in the world. And with Russia backing Serbia, war and conflict is threatening to pop off there all the time as well. So this is what U.S. interventionism brings. More destabilization, more death, more violence. Ukraine is no different, and now they just want to turn it into a permanent site of violence, the same way they've done with the state of Israel. And their plan has been to do this with Ukraine. I'm sure their plan has been to turn Ukraine into a sort of larger Israel since 2014 at least. When Victoria Nuland and the NED and all these NGOs were dumping all this money into Ukraine under Barack Obama, you have the Euromaidan coup carried out, heavily influenced by the U.S. and NGOs connected to the U.S. State Department. And then you have Donald Trump, this person not from the political establishment, defeat Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. So it got in the way of the Democrats and what they wanted to do in Ukraine. So that's why we got Russiagate, right? We need to continue fear-mongering about Russia, continue building support among the American public that Russia's evil and the U.S. needs to wage a proxy war or a real war against Russia. Let's say that Russia influenced our elections, hacked our elections, and put Donald Trump in power. So then we got Russiagate pushed by the entire liberal establishment for 4 years. Biden gets back in power, or Biden comes to power in 2020. Another member of the Democratic establishment that Hillary and Obama are part of, and boom, it's back to proxy war with Russia. NATO's constantly threatening to expand, training troops in Ukraine, threatening to add Ukraine as a NATO member country, continuing to threaten Russia and build with hostility towards Russia until we got the invasion, special military operation, whatever you want to call it. But absolutely NATO provoked, and now we know why. They want to turn Ukraine into Israel. Not cool. How does Zav think about this plan? They probably love it. They're probably like, sweet, we're going to be hooked up with all these military grade weapons, just like the IDF. I mean, they already are. They already are hooked up with these military grade weapons, the Zav, which we're going to go over next. Our buddies at Infographics, who we've covered a lot on this show. It's like YouTube essay history channel that does like cartoons. They did some ridiculous propaganda video for Ukrainian weapons contractors. I mean, our American weapons contractors. Eddie, I don't know if you're willing to react to another oversimplified video. Well, I will at some point, but we're doing a different infographics video. They're the people who do oversimplified. So, another time when we're not reacting to another one of their videos. But I got to go grab something again. I'm pulling up another wrestling video. I'll be way shorter this time. Should I show myself losing? Nah. Why would I do that when I can just choose videos of myself winning? Right? Like, come on. Uh-oh, I don't know if this one's going to load either. What's going on with this? Why ain't my videos loading? I'm going to have to have a word with USA Wrestling. Not cool, USA Wrestling. Not cool at all. What is this? Well, maybe it'll load, maybe it won't. Either way, I will return in like 2 seconds. Man, this is not a good omen if I can't get my YouTube videos to load. Oh well. I'm sure I'll get everything I need to load. It's just the wrestling videos. Infographics has a vid on the worst rulers of Russia with an angry Stalin and Putin face. Yeah. They are just garbage history. Garbage history. Like Wikipedia level, surface level history. Absolute propaganda. And this last video makes me wonder if there's some sort of connection, like indirect or direct, to the State Department or to some, pro-war company or corporation, or Silicon Valley companies, because their videos get absurd amounts of views. I mean, they are boosted in the algorithm like nobody's business, which we've talked about before. But also this most recent video is directly promoting the sale of American weapons and giving American weapons to Ukraine, and promoting the idea that American weapons are allowing Ukraine to take some very, very big and important victories, When in reality, as Scott Ritter says, it's more akin to NATO and the U.S. pushing Ukrainians towards their death, towards the Russian military at gunpoint, and saying over and over and over and over again, they're willing to fight down to the last man. We need to send them more weapons, as American weapons contractors are making a killing. So let's just watch this video from Infographics here. Midwestern Marks recently published an article about a lot of pro-Ukrainian bot accounts that have been coordinated, social media propaganda campaigns that have been coordinated by various groups connected to the Ukrainian government or corporations in favor of the proxy war in Ukraine. So yeah, I think this is a timely video to react to. This is Infographics, the U.S. weapon beating the Russians in Ukraine. Weapon singular, I guess. I haven't watched this whole thing.
East of Ukraine, a drab green military truck roars to life and pulls out of its temporary shelter inside some trees. On its back is a single pod of 6 227mm rockets. Despite having less power than a traditional multiple rocket launch system, this single truck is the deadliest weapon in the Ukrainian war. The driver clears the trees and the crew gets to work. As the rocket pod lifts up off the bed of the truck on its own and swings to the left, targeting data provided by the U.S. satellites and secret intelligence sources is fed into the firing computer, which in turn programs each rocket with its own impact point. Once ready, a simple press of a button.
I like how they just openly admit that the U.S. is helping to wage a war against Russia. It's not just, weapons contractors, because a lot of countries buy weapons from the U.S. We have all these weapons contractors. We have the military-industrial complex. But they're saying that U.S. satellites and the U.S. government are coordinating missile strikes for Ukraine. It's like you can't get any closer to coordinating a war effort, but I think they're just banking on the fact that because Russia technically invaded first, if you ignore U.S. NGOs and the NED and millions of dollars of U.S. meddling and support for pro-U.S. groups in Ukraine, the U.S. is just banking on the fact that they can do anything and involve themselves as much as they want outside of, actually putting boots on the ground. Because it's Russia. Americans have this, built-in sort of hatred and distrust of Russia from years and years of Cold War propaganda and McCarthyism. They're just like, we can do the Cold War 2.0, and then we can, coordinate missile strikes against Russia, and no one will care.
And 6 of the big rockets screaming into the sky. As soon as the last rocket clears the launcher, the truck is already on the move. This single piece of rocket artillery provided by the United States is Ukraine's most important weapon and is the single most hunted piece of hardware of the entire war. Russian troops are on the hunt for each and every one of these 16 trucks currently in the nation, and their commanders have been ordered to expend any amount of life required to destroy them. Thus, the trucks are constantly on the move, never staying still in one place for long and always under heavy cover when idle. They pop out of their tree cover or camo netting to fire a salvo, and then immediately retreat to avoid counter battery fire or an air attack. It's a dangerous game of cat and mouse, but to date, the Ukrainians have been winning to devastating effect. The truck is long gone by the time its rockets find their target, several dozen miles behind enemy lines, well out of reach of any other artillery.
And they're straight up arguing this line that Ukraine is quote-unquote winning, which, as Petamillo says, why do people romanticize winning this horrible conflict? Yeah, there's so much in the Western media trying to push this idea that Ukraine could win. When there's Scott Ritter estimates 60,000 dead Ukrainians and 10,000 approximately dead Russians. So, nobody's really winning here. There's so many people dead. There's so many civilians dead in the Donbass, and there's so many trade union leaders and people in the Donbass who have been killed since the U.S. got heavily involved in Ukraine in 2014 and in the years leading up to that. I mean, no one's quote unquote winning except for the weapons contractors, except for the people who sell these giant tanks that Infographics is bragging about and is claiming, is helping Ukraine win. Win by having 60,000 of their people killed and a bunch of their infrastructure and cities and roads destroyed. the win, or a win for all the people, would be NATO ending their endless pursuit of waging a proxy war against Russia and finding a peace agreement. But that wouldn't make money for weapons contractors, so that's not what they're going to do, because they have to keep winning and have to keep expanding, and they win the more war there is.
Russian Colonel Andrei Vasilyev, commander of an elite paratrooper regiment, is taking a meeting with his senior officers. To date, Russia has lost a whopping 55 colonels in its half-a-year effort in Ukraine, a casualty figure so staggering, the only parallel is from the Second World War. Thus, Colonel Vasilyev has taken great pains to keep his exact location a secret. But U.S. intelligence has found him and transmitted the GPS coordinates of his secret command post to the Ukrainians. One rocket impacts the command post with a precision of half a meter, instantly incinerating the good colonel and his officers. For him, the war is over. But for those Russians still living, the deadly rain of rockets continues. Supplies and ammunition for artillery pieces is destroyed, as dozens of other soldiers are killed or wounded in the precision strikes. Colonel Andrei Vasilyev is now the 56th Russian colonel to die in Ukraine. But he won't be the last. And a large part of Ukraine's stunning success in recent months is all down to one single gift from the United States.
This is insane. This is insane. They're just straight up bragging about helping Ukraine kill this Russian colonel. This higher up in the Russian military, and saying, you know why we were able to do this? This beautiful piece of machinery right here. This beautiful hunk of American freedom. And every one of these that's sold makes $500,000 for Raytheon. Ain't that beautiful? Let's sell more guns, more weapons, more Raytheon profits. Who cares how many are killed?
States, the High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, otherwise known as HIMARS. The impact of HIMARS in Ukraine cannot be understated. While the Javelin has become the patron saint and protector of Ukraine, this American weapon is far deadlier to the Russians than even the Javelin. And that's thanks to its range and precision. With just 12 of these weapon systems in the country, Ukraine has ground the Russian offensive to nearly a complete halt. But how in the world could so few weapons be giving Russia so much trouble? And why can't Russia overcome such tiny numbers of U.S. weapons? The HIMARS was developed.
I want to pause and highlight Manny Cardova's comment. It's just so cold, man. It is. It's so uncaring and unsensitive to any kind of death. Because like we're saying, NATO is basically pushing Ukrainians to their death, trying to get them to wage this proxy war with Russia as long as they can get them to. So that's sad in reality. But this video is just totally uncaring towards Russian people. You know, these Russian troops, whether you like them or not, or believe in what they're doing or not, you know, they're following orders, following their government's orders, the same way that American troops would have to. It's just like, oh, look at these darn Russian troops getting shot at by these wonderful American weapons. They won't be the last who get shot by our artillery. Let's talk about how amazing these weapons built by Raytheon, Boeing, and these in the military-industrial complex are. Despite the fact that the military-industrial complex, because of the fact that they profit off war, have been lobbying for interventionism and murderous wars for, I don't know, since when did the military-industrial complex come about? 1960 about? I mean, it's crazy. Because even if, you know, even if you're totally against the Russian intervention, and you think it's awful, and you think they had no reason, you know, to go in, and no national security reasons to invade, and that denazification isn't a real thing. Even if you take that position, the military-industrial complex, the people who make these HIMARS, you know, are the people who lobbied for Iraq and Afghanistan, and these wars that killed millions and millions and millions of people for U.S. colonial expansion, and so people can make money off selling weapons. So for those people to be totally uncaring about Russian troops because they're fighting for the bad guys is ridiculous. The NATO, the finance capitalist NATO, and the military-industrial complex are the real bad guys, and they're the real ones winning from this war.
developed in the late 1990s for use by the U.S. Army. The system is not much different than any other rocket artillery, save for the fact that instead of the 2 rocket pods used by the Army's M270 MLRS, HIMARS has only 1 pod for greatly increased mobility. This allows the system to very quickly move into firing position and then escape before enemy counter-battery fire or a ground attack mission arrives on scene. And it's why Russia is having such a great difficulty neutralizing the dozen units provided to Ukraine. HIMARS can be loaded with a standard 6-rocket pod or can carry a single tactical ballistic missile with a quick conversion. Its rockets have a range of between 1.2 and 190 miles, or up to 190 miles when using the Army's ATACM surface-to-surface missile. It can even be equipped with a SLAM-RAM missile, surface-launched variants of the AMRAAM anti-aircraft missile. But its versatility doesn't end there, because unlike any other rocket artillery in the world, HIMARS can even engage targets while loaded up on a transport ship. In October 2017, the U.S. Marine
I mean, this has to be State Department influenced, right? This infographics video. Because why else would they go in so much depth about the weapons that the U.S. military and that the military-industrial complex are offering to Ukraine? And how would they even know these things? Right? How would they even know, look, it can be equipped with this and that and this and that? You know, what would be the point in investigating that and bragging about it? Unless you're trying to hype up the military-industrial complex. And like I said, these videos get so many views. They just get boosted to high heaven in the algorithm. So we'll watch just a little bit more, but I think we are getting the picture here.
Marine Corps fired a single rocket while at sea from the deck of an amphibious transport dock ship, successfully hitting a shore target with precision. This now makes HIMARS deadly not just on the land, but even when it's still loaded on a ship and waiting to be delivered. The weapon system saw wide use in the Iraq-Afghanistan conflicts, and in a prelude of what was to come if Russia had been paying attention, HIMARS's high precision allowed it to target Taliban commanders' hideouts in October of 2010, forcing...
Dude! If Russia had been paying attention, they would have seen all the infrastructure and people that we killed with these missiles in Iraq and Afghanistan. And they would know that the military-industrial complex is willing to wipe out as many people and as many things as they need to in order to continue making money and continue upholding U.S. hegemonic dominance globally. If only Russia had been paying attention, they'd know how cool the military-industrial complex is and how sweet their missiles are. I mean, this is absurd. This is just straight war propaganda, but not even just war propaganda. Like literally military-industrial complex, Raytheon, Boeing, weapons manufacturer, weapons contractor propaganda. It was specifically bragging about the sale and transport and usage of U.S. weapons all around the world, including in the illegal invasion of Iraq, which Noam Chomsky calls the crime of the century, killing millions of people, a war based on lies, which we now know were lies, for the enrichment of companies like Halliburton, weapons manufacturers, and, of course, oil companies. So this is a new way that they do propaganda. Through the infographic show with 12.1 million subscribers, bragging about U.S. weapons and how they get used around the world. That's where your tax money's going, and infographics loves it. They love it. And the military-industrial complex has been active not just on YouTube, not just in entertainment media, funding movies like Top Gun. And, the Department of Defense has kept close ties with Hollywood forever. We did a video about entertainment media imperialism a while back, but they've also just been going on the news. And when they go on the news a lot of times, the news outlets like MSNBC or PBS or CNN or whoever else is having these military generals or executives who make money off of selling weapons on, they won't disclose that. They won't even say who these people are. They won't even say that there's a conflict of interest. They just let these people come on and spew military-industrial complex propaganda and just act like this is some military expert or this is some unbiased expert. When it's somebody who literally makes more money, the more wars that there are. So this is from Matt Orfeo Falia. I don't know how to say his name, but he's great. He's a video editor who does a lot of videos exposing the bourgeoisie and the imperialists. He almost worked for the Bernie Sanders campaign, but somebody went back and canceled him for some old inappropriate tweets that he had made, which drove me crazy when I worked for the Bernie campaign. I was like, this guy's so talented. We have to let him in the campaign. But of course they didn't. But anyways, he now puts together a lot of great anti-imperialist videos. So I'm probably going to go fill up my water while I play this Weapons for Ukraine.
Deliver the heavy weapons. The U.S. has contributed, I think, nearly $2 billion in aid, militarily, economic, since this war began. Can the U.S. be doing more?
The most important thing right now is the weapon systems, the weapons they need. They need to have Stingers and the Javelins, but they also need anti-aircraft capabilities. They need anti-missile capabilities. They need anti-tank capabilities. There's a lot of weapon systems, the weapons they need. We have to bring these weapons to get the weapons to the Ukrainians, to move these weapon systems, to deliver those weapon systems, make sure that the Ukrainians are getting the weapons with anti-missile capabilities, Patriot missiles, the S-300s, the S-400s, weapon systems. Additional aircraft, as many weapons as necessary to provide weapons, so sophisticated weapons, whatever possible weapons can be provided.
Undisclosed conflict of interest. He works at a firm whose clients include Raytheon, the second largest military contractors in the world.
The most important thing right now is the weapons.
We should arm the Ukrainians, providing weapons, providing supplies, defenses to arm with weapons, with ammunition. We have to simply do more, to do something more. To do more, we will have to do more. More direct involvement of some kind will be inevitable. More arms, more and more pressure for us to do more and more by way of supplying weapons, arms.
Undisclosed conflict of interest. He's on the board of directors at Lockheed Martin, the largest military contractor in the world.
Arm the Ukrainians, anti-tank, get them armed drones. We need to make sure that we get them air defense systems and ammunition, lots of ammunition. Whatever we can get them, we're going to have to continue to arm the Ukrainians.
Undisclosed conflict of interest. She's the chair of the BAE Systems Board of Directors.
By the way, I've been always for us to update and modernize our nuclear arsenal. That's important.
We need to continue to flow the weapons. They need missiles, anything they ask for. We need to get the weapons systems, heavy weapons.
Anything they ask for. Anything. We will send our own troops. We will draft our own people into the military and send them to Ukraine if that's what's needed. If that's what will make money for the military-industrial complex, we will do it. And a good point to make out about the military, nice. A good point to make about the military-industrial complex is that so many companies are tied to it at this point. So many companies, because like if you talk to military people who have been deployed, the bases are like filled with consumerism. You know, they'll have like Starbucks there or Apple stores on the military bases where you can buy products. So it's a massive moneymaker for those companies. And a lot of other companies. There's a really good book called The Complex, How the Military Invades Our Everyday Lives, by Nick Turse, and showing how even if you try to like boycott companies who are tied to the military-industrial complex, it's almost impossible. There's just way too many. You know, the breakfast cereal that you eat in the morning is tied to the military-industrial complex. The laundry you use, and this is just concentration, monopolization, accumulation, things that Marx noticed about capitalism combined with imperialism. And all these companies where capital has concentrated are tied to imperialism and make money off of imperialism. So this is a really good book about that. And there's Apple, Iraq, political. I think it's called. Where do I find this? Yeah, this is a famous famous parody of a famous photo of someone in Abu Ghraib, I believe, which was a U.S. prison where they tortured people, and said basically, tell us that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction or we're going to torture you, and wouldn't let people go until they said Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. And then the U.S. used that as justification for invading Iraq, even though Saddam Hussein didn't have weapons of mass destruction. And Apple was actually tied to these efforts, and somehow they had been giving funding to the military base in Abu Ghraib. I believe it was something like there was literally an Apple store set up there where the troops could shop at. So this was a parody of Apple that was made, one of those famous Apple commercials where they're dancing around with an iPod Shuffle. But it's depicting a real photo of somebody in Abu Ghraib being tortured. Yeah. Super chat. Thank you, Alexander. Made a pistrito. The bots became war bots. Too much of the English internet is like the spammed phone system. Yes. And people deny this and don't think it's true. Like I've seen people claim, I complained about our TikTok account being taken down, saying our TikTok got swarmed like I've never seen it before. First during SOS Cuba, this U.S. color revolution attempt in Cuba, but then later on, much worse during the Russian military operation / invasion of Ukraine. Account was swarmed and then it was taken down, and TikTok told us. TikTok said, we reviewed your account manually and we've determined it violates community guidelines. Then Mint Press News releases that TikTok's content managers are former NATO operatives, right? And Jackson Hinkle reported or leaked these screenshots of people connected to the Ukrainian government forming Discord chats to mass report and send negative comments and hate towards accounts like ours, who are critical of the Ukrainian military, Ukrainian government, and of NATO's actions. Caitlin Johnstone has followed this every step of the way. But people will still be like, people still make this argument because all they have are personal smears and individualized attacks rather than real arguments. But people point at me and say, Eddie's so egotistical. He thinks that bots took his account down or that the Ukrainian government took his account down. Like, well, it definitely had something to do with it. I mean, look at all the evidence around it. And I don't understand how that even makes me egotistical. There have been a lot of people who got their accounts taken down. I don't deny that. Here's the article. Sorry, I was looking for this forever. I couldn't friggin' find it. Exposed, the vast pro-Ukrainian bot army designed to influence Western policymakers by Orinoco Tribune. And it doesn't have to be bots that say things, right? It doesn't have to be bots that leave comments. We were talking about this on Ramiro's show, on Masking Imperialism, which we were just on. All they have to do is like a certain kind of content, retweet a certain kind of content, boost a certain kind of content, and they'll get people to spread the pro-war propaganda for them, right? Because everybody spends so much time online. Everybody spends so much time curating their online profile, and everybody gets a dopamine hit when you see that people like your stuff or retweeted your stuff or are supporting your stuff. So by having bot accounts who like a certain kind of content, pro-imperialist, pro-capitalist content, you can influence the way that the whole algorithm works and the way that you can influence the way that people think, because we're pretty much cyborgs at this point tied to our phones. But what was I going to say? Oh, I was going to say, make sure to like the stream. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bell. People have been getting unsubscribed. It's those darn Ukrainian bots again. And those darn Silicon Valley oligarchs unsubscribing you from our good anti-imperialist Marxist content. Make sure to subscribe on Rumble, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, our website, and then like our content to boost it in the algorithm. Like it if you're on Facebook. Give it a heart. Help us defeat Silicon Valley. Too many bots on online surveys for research, too. I imagine so. I imagine that influences surveys in various ways. Boost, thank you, Big Brother. Not literal Big Brother, that was his username. Alright, so we covered infographics. Ooh. I guess we should cover this last. Next. This is from the Rand Corporation, who some of you know I'm getting a master's degree or graduate degree in healthcare administration right now. And we have to read studies or public policy decisions from the Rand Corporation all the time. All the time. These guys are very powerful. They're very influential, connected to a lot of very wealthy investors, shareholders, some of the most powerful capitalists on Wall Street. And they play a huge role in crafting U.S. policy. And you can see here on, the front page of their little document here, they've got a U.S. chess piece positioned against a Russian chess piece. So the U.S. military, the U.S. State Department, and the U.S. empire has not really made it a secret that they're trying to wage a proxy war against Russia and ultimately China. Right? They're pretty much saying this out loud, saying that the future of liberal Western democracy hinges on defeating Russia and China. They've been pretty clear about this, but it's still interesting to see, symbolism this strong, or this, obviously saying the quiet part out loud. Like, yes, we are doing a global war against Russia. And I've gotten to the point now where people are calling me treasonous or like a traitor for not supporting the U.S.'s proxy war with Russia, or unpatriotic or whatever, as if we all need to back our imperialist government and the finance capitalists who want to send American workers to fight and die in endless wars for capital expansion. But this is from our buddy Andy. Some of you might remember Andy. He's been on stream a few times. He's very busy, so he's not able to come on all the time. But he sent me this, and I believe he wanted me to check out page 92. Actually, let me just see what he said. Yeah, people know Andy from TikTok. They know him from being on our stream. Blah, 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 blah. Where is he, though? They know him from looking like Stalin, because he does. Page 90 plus, 95, sorry. Okay, so here it is. There are 3 important risks to changing the gas supply relationship. First, it could lower the reliability of gas supplies to Europe. So here, this is what Andy wanted me to see, yeah. They want to create supplies alternative to Russia for gas. Lower Russian export revenues, stress the Russian budget, lead to cuts in Russian defense spending, basically weaken the Russian military and weaken the Russian economy in any way they can. And they're doing this partially because they recognize that European countries are increasingly getting their energy from Russia. And Russia is increasingly, as we've been saying, since Putin came to power, they've been increasingly investing the surplus that comes from their gas industry and their energy industry into building up their country, their infrastructure, their military, their defense. And the U.S. hates this. The U.S. wants to be the hegemonic imperial superpower. The finance capitalists in London and Wall Street do not want Russia and China challenging their global economic domination like they have been. They don't want them trading with countries the U.S. was trying to isolate. So the plan is to do everything they can to sabotage and destabilize Russia. And if you don't believe me, I don't know what to tell you, because it says it right here in a document from the Rand Corporation, one of the most powerful and influential interest groups in the country. So there you have it. If you listen closely enough, they'll just tell you. They'll just tell you what they're doing. Oh, yeah. And as I said, if you study healthcare administration in the U.S., not only do they do propaganda for the Rand Corporation all the time, but they do it for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation all the time. With a recent article I wrote about Bill Gates' failed effort to feed Africa, which really wasn't an effort to feed Africa at all. This was based off something I read in my healthcare administration textbook. Right? It said that Bill and Melinda Gates are making a health policy decision when they send nutritious food and agricultural infrastructure to Africa. And I've said, I don't think that's what they're actually doing. Turns out there was just recently a summit held that my healthcare administration textbook made no mention of in Rwanda, basically saying that all Bill Gates has done is poison the soil and debt trap farmers, give them credits or loans from wealthy Western banks with very high interest rates that farmers aren't able to pay back. And then they use those loans to buy things from Western multinationals selling farming equipment. But ultimately, it traps the farmers in debt while making a bunch of money for Western banks and Western multinationals, leading to increased inequality during COVID and the war in Ukraine. Statistics like poverty and malnutrition have increased despite Bill Gates sending billions of dollars to Africa. And then Bill Gates responded to the summit in Rwanda, which got barely any coverage in Western media other than the Seattle Times. Shout out to them for covering it, which I cited in this. Bill Gates responded by committing $200 million more, by changing the name of the Green Revolution because it had gotten bad publicity, and committing way more money, saying we need more credits, meaning more loans for small African farmers, and more fertilizer, which are the two things at the summit that they said are poisoning the soil and trapping farmers in debt. These are the two things we don't want, and this is the two things that African policy experts said they don't want are the two things that Bill Gates said we need more of. He said the Green Revolution is actually the best thing ever. We just need more of it. So it's absurd. Got to pay attention to Bill Gates and the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset, and the way that they use philanthropy as a tool of colonialism. Got to pay attention to it. It's important. And thankfully, the article that I wrote got pretty popular this week. Huge shout out to Lauren McKenzie, this comrade who had a tweet go semi-viral, sharing our work, saying, so Bill Gates used a program in Africa promising to help farmers plant crops and start a green revolution. Instead, he poisoned the land and debt-trapped farmers. True. Here's an article about it, and you see that has 12.7 thousand likes, woo, and over 3,000 retweets. Very cool. This one with over 1,000 likes in response says, here's an article about it. Since every single media/news outlet is owned by the very same billionaires, the rest of us have to save ourselves and the planet from. Exactly why Western media did not talk about the summit in Rwanda. Exactly why it was left up to Midwestern March, this publication that me and my buddy started out of college with a $400 a month budget. Subscribe to our Patreon, by the way. Speaking of which, if you want to support our work and allow us to produce more work, but they didn't report on it. Actually, all that was published, other than the Seattle Times article about the Rwanda summit, was a piece from New York Times, I believe. Yeah, it was the New York Times interviewing Bill Gates, just giving him a platform, to push his agenda and say that the Green Revolution has been the best thing ever, and offering only soft criticisms, which I talked about that in the article. But then Lauren McKenzie also shared the TikTok we made about it because Putin has now offered to send fertilizer to developing nations for free so that they can disconnect from Bill Gates and the so-called Green Revolution and all these investors who have poisoned the soil. And then she said to go follow this dude. So shout out Lauren McKenzie. We gained an insane amount of insane amount of Twitter followers from that. Our Twitter was, I believe, at 69.9 a day or two ago, and now it's at not 69, 26.9. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Now it's at 28.8 thousand. So we went up thousands of followers. Thank you very much, Lauren. Much appreciated. So yeah, pretty proud of that article. Pretty pumped. Bill Gates, puke, yes. Bill Gates is one of those people we can turn anybody against. Because think about it. We were talking about the CPUSA manual from 1935 at the beginning of the stream, and how it says that the allies of the working class in their organizing should be small to medium farmers, petty bourgeoisie, lower middle class, things like this. And all these people are against Bill Gates. All of these people, especially the farmers, the small and medium agricultural workers or landowners, because Bill Gates is buying up so much land. Bill Gates in the World Economic Forum and is attempting to make so many profits off farming, no matter what it does to the soil or how unproductive it is in terms of producing and distributing food. So anybody can be turned against an oligarch like Bill Gates. Also, he's, made tons and tons and tons of money off the pharmaceutical industry and off the medical industry. He was one of the people who increased his profits a massive amount during COVID while helping to craft government COVID policy. So yeah, there's a lot there to criticize. Need some water. All right, let's see what the chat's up to. Natural farming techniques involve fermentation and probiotics. I'm not much of a farmer, but I did start gardening this year. I'm a huge fan of gardening. I was reading also some Hegel, some dialectics as I was learning to garden. And Hegel uses plants as an analogy a lot for development and how things develop based on their internal contradictions and grow into something qualitatively different. So it was really interesting and cool, I thought, to read Hegel's philosophy while also gardening for the first time. A little nerdy and corny, but shout out to my garden. I got some big tomatoes and chilies now. Check out Korean natural farming and permaculture. Okay, that sounds interesting. My Brothers and Sisters in the North is a good documentary about North Korea. And they don't go into specifics, but the documentarian does go and visit some of the collective farms in Korea to show how they operate, how they produce food for the society, and how they've tried to create food self-sustainability and food sovereignty so they're not reliant on other countries, because the U.S. has held an embargo on North Korea ever since the war. The strictest embargo ever, tied with that the U.S. has kept on Cuba. So, yeah, I will check out their farming techniques. One of the last things I want to talk about, I don't know if this will be the last thing we talk about. I can find some other stuff to cover, but this is one of the last things that I had marked off to cover today. This is from Mark Weisbrot, who's somebody I cited a lot in my undergraduate thesis about Venezuela. who does work for the Center for Economic Policy and Research. A lot of times that goes against the U.S. empire and the narratives of the U.S. empire by producing economic data, sort of going in the face of their narratives. So, thank you, Paul Dill. I hope I'm saying your name right. Paul is a patron, longtime Patreon supporter, and he also just gave us a $20 super chat. Cheers to the most handsome Marxist on the planet. Nice shirt. Thank you. I'm glad you like Legend of Zelda. I think Carlos is better looking than me. However, I really appreciate your support. Appreciate the financial support, but even more than that, I support you boosting my ego. So thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate it. But this is from Mark Weisbrot, which says that the U.S. sanctions on Afghanistan are causing economic disruption, which has induced the loss of billions of dollars in aid, and 22.8 million people, more than half of Afghanistan's population, is now facing acute food insecurity. This includes 1 million children under 5 years old at risk of dying due to severe acute malnutrition. That's according to UNICEF. This is a direct result of the Biden sanctions. A direct result of the U.S. saying, no, Afghanistan, you're not allowed to trade, import, or export after we occupied your country for 20 years. Why? Probably because China reached out to the Taliban, and China wanted to potentially make Afghanistan a BRICS country, but definitely greatly increased trade with Afghanistan. Afghanistan is very close to China geographically. It'd be an obvious trade partner. But the U.S. doesn't want that, of course. So they're putting sanctions on this country that they've occupied and destabilized and prevented from having a real central government, and starving their people. Half of their country is facing acute food insecurity and malnutrition. Half of their country. This is absurd cruelty. And people like to give Biden a pat on the back. People like Kyle Kalinske of Secular Talk, has given Biden a pat on the back for what he did in withdrawing from Afghanistan. But if you look at the historical legacy of what the U.S. has done in Afghanistan, and then look at the fact that now that they've finally pulled out, they're maintaining sanctions and trying to starve their people and prevent them from having any kind of economic growth or development. It's absurd. It makes the U.S. look like the most evil country in the world, the most quote-unquote authoritarian country in the world, to use their own words. In a video that I think helps explain this pretty well, there's a really good video from Vijay Prashad on YouTube where he's being interviewed about Afghanistan, the history of social reform in Afghanistan, economic development, class struggle, U.S. and Western imperialism, all these various things. But it's about 35 minutes long, so we can't watch it on stream. However, there's a shorter clip that I've shared on TikTok before that I really like, where Vijay Prashad is just talking about the Soviet intervention in Afghanistan. The Soviet intervention, which prompted the U.S. to start funding and arming Osama bin Laden's Mujahideen, which would later splinter into groups like Al-Qaeda, as well as groups like the ETIM, who are still a violent separatist extremist group still active in China today. So long-lasting effects for the region, the way that the U.S. backed violent extremist groups in order to fight the Soviets. And Vijay details a lot of interesting things about it here. So let's check it out.
PJ, would you comment on what was the actual story behind the entry of the Soviet Union into Afghanistan?
Yes, slightly off topic, but I'll be happy to talk about it a little. In 1973, there was the government of Mohammed Daoud in Afghanistan. Mohammed Daoud was the prime minister for many years. He was himself a liberal aristocrat, and had worked very closely with the left to advance a progressive agenda in Afghanistan. You may know that in the 1964 Constitution was the first time they allowed elections in Afghanistan. There were 4 women in the parliament in 1965. One of them, a close friend of mine, communist leader Anahita Ratebzad. All of them worked to push a kind of, progressive agenda in Afghanistan. Mohammad Dawood was the prime minister in 73. He took over as the head of government. And he decided that the obstacles to advancing progress had to be basically, dispatched. And so he went after the group of Islamists, particularly their leader, Burhanuddin Rabbani, who was a professor of theology at Kabul University, and his lieutenants, Gulbuddin Hekmatyar and Ahmad Shah Massoud. And the government went after these people and they fled to Pakistan, to Peshawar, where they were heavily funded by the Saudis. The Saudi oil money had flown in 1973 at the same time. Saudis started to fund people like this. And they, from Pakistan, Peshawar, set up a whole set of institutions to bring in so-called refugees. So-called refugees because these were their Jamaati Islami people coming across the border. They trained them. Later, the United States got involved. And they were actually trying to undermine the liberal government of Mohammad Dawood. Later, when the communists took power in 1978, in April, about 18,000 literacy workers went out into the rural areas in a mass literacy campaign. Literacy rate in Afghanistan was about 18%, pretty low, and so that was the high point of the communist agenda. Burhanuddin Rabbani and his gang sent their thugs across the border to start killing these literacy workers. That was one of the first things they did. The government inside Kabul was in a terrible factional struggle between various Hafizullah Amin and Tariqi on one side, Baba Kamal and Anahita Ratebzad on the other, and so on. There was a faction fight. When Kamal prevailed finally, and Amin and Tariqi were dispatched, both killed in terrible faction fighting, when Kamal prevailed, he found that these people in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, now Pakistan with a right-wing military dictatorship of General Zia-ul-Haq, were very aggressive coming across the border to kill people. And it's at that point that Kamal requested Soviet help. The Soviets in the Politburo debated this for months, didn't want to come across the border. This is all now revealed as the Soviet Politburo notes have been released. They didn't want to come. Eventually they came, and the reason they came was they were afraid of 2 repeats. The repeat of Indonesia, 1965. By the way, today is the 30th of September. On the 30th of September 1965, the coup of Suharto against the Sukarno government led to the killing of 1 million communists in Indonesia. Today is the anniversary. And they also worried about what had happened recently in Chile in 1973 with the killing of the communists around Salvador Allende and the coup by Pinochet. So motivated by Indonesia and by Chile, the Soviets eventually sent troops across the border. They really didn't want to be there. I mean, Andropov and co were very unhappy with this move. They knew from the experience of Hungary and Czechoslovakia and so on that this would look very bad around the world. And they didn't want it. They wanted the Afghans to deal with this by themselves. So it's a very interesting story, my friends, but it takes us away from our topic a little bit.
Well, but it doesn't because the attempt to overthrow the the Bolshevik revolution has been ongoing virtually since the revolution existed. And this was just another attempt to do that, covered up by all kinds of things that you've been talking about brilliantly, as usual. But that's the motive undergirding this whole operation in Afghanistan. And one of the things that happened was people were being told for 16 years that the U.S. was going to leave. And they kept staying because it was a job. And as long as the job was there, the people needed to stay there. Now we're finding out, after all the accusations about the evacuation, that the people were under a threat, that if they didn't leave, the armies there, what do you call the people that were going to kill them all? So it's not as though Biden was being, I hate to defend Biden, but not as though he was being foolish in what he did. He got so many people out of the way of being murdered by the insurgents on the other side.
So you see the narrative that the U.S. is given about, the Soviet invasion or intervention in Afghanistan for so long is BS. And, of course, even if the Soviet Union was involved in Afghanistan and trying to stabilize their country, they were trying to put a democratic government in power that had been fighting for social reform for years, right? That had been launching massive literacy campaigns and teaching people to read all over the country and fighting for women's rights, all sorts of social reforms as well as economic reforms. So if the Soviet Union was successful in stabilizing that government, putting that government in power and helping them build hospitals and schools and other things, not to say, the Soviet intervention was perfect, as Vijay Prashad said there. Any kind of military intervention, the U.S. is allowed to weaponize, and it looks bad globally. Very similar to the Russian intervention in Ukraine that we're seeing now. But, if you read any reports from Afghanistan, it's clear that that was the most hopeful time in the country's history, the most hopeful time for their future, that they were going to see, real economic and political development in the country. And the Soviets were, in fact, helping them, set up hospitals and set up schools and other administrative and community apparatuses to try and really establish some kind of democratic government. But, you also had these reactionary extremist groups there, and the U.S. supported, armed, funded, and backed them every step of the way, which then makes it so absurd that in 2001, the U.S. invades and occupies Afghanistan for 20 years to fight the war on terror. You're going to fight terrorists in Afghanistan. What do you mean? You were funding the terrorists in Afghanistan for years, and you said we needed to because the Soviet Union was there. But when we occupy them much more violently and in a much more corrupt, money-making way than the Soviet Union ever did, that's okay because we're fighting terrorism. I mean, it's so crazy. And then you see when you look at things historically, going as far back as 40 years, and we could go back much further. As I said, Vijay Prashad's got like a 40-minute interview about Afghanistan on YouTube that I recommend people check out, going over the whole history. But even that brief history going back 40 years, you see how absurd and violent and just straight up evil, freaking satanic it is for Joe Biden to maintain sanctions on Afghanistan, pushing 2 million or over 2 million, well over 2 million, over 22 million, people into food insecurity by preventing them from trading and by preventing them from engaging in cooperative economic relationships with anyone in the world, especially Russia and China. Because heaven forbid Russia and China help countries develop their infrastructure so people stop starving and dying. So this is just an evil act by Joe Biden. Heinous act. Almost unbelievable that he would maintain sanctions on Venezuelan people when it's being openly reported that it's going to lead to 22.8 million people being in food insecurity. I mean, it already is. Wild. The lesser of two evils, right? At least we don't have Trump making mean tweets. What a joke. Oops. I accidentally closed my stream plans. There we go. I got them open. I don't have much left anyways. I'm almost done with Vijay and Noam Chomsky's new book, The Withdrawal, which covers the U.S. involvement in the Middle East from Afghanistan to Libya. That sounds like an awesome book. I've been meaning to read it. Vijay posted all the books that he's published or been a part of this year earlier. And that was one of them, and I thought that would be interesting, especially because Noam Chomsky is writing the intro for the Journal of American Socialist Studies 2, which will be publishing soon. There's the Journal of American Socialist Studies 1 behind me. But number 2 will have an intro from Mr. Chomsky, so we're very, very excited about that. Obviously, he's not a Marxist-Leninist, not completely in line with us, but he's an influential and inspirational figure for a lot of people. Great criticisms of the U.S. empire and Western finance capital that get a lot of people started with anti-imperialism and socialism. So, yeah. Highly recommend. It's super accessible and informative. Very cool. Thank you for the recommendation, Manny. Like LMFAO, almost all the terrorist factions have been largely trained by NATO paramilitary groups and trafficking those terrorists in and out of conflicts like Xinjiang, Syria, Libya, Azerbaijan. Yeah, and that's why I always try and connect the Mujahideen that the U.S. funded to the ETIM, the East Turkestan Islamic Movement, because the Mujahideen did split into Al Qaeda and other groups like that. But the East Turkestan Islamic Movement, who the U.S. took off of their official listing for terrorist groups a while back, is a separatist, violent, extremist group in China, in Xinjiang, China. So they're against the PRC, the Chinese government. They're a very small minority of the Uyghur people in that region. But they've come to prominence and been able to recruit and get arms and support with the help of the U.S. State Department and with help of U.S. intelligence. And it largely started with the U.S. funding of the Mujahideen, which is why it's so ridiculous that the U.S. would invade Iraq and Afghanistan to fight the war on terror, because most of these groups, as this comment says, have been trained and backed by NATO. They've been trained and backed by the U.S. themselves. And Vijay Prashad, who we've been talking about a lot, I don't know if I have his book on me right now. I don't want to look for it, but it's called Washington Bullets. There's a really good chapter in Washington Bullets called Hope Lay in the Muslim Revival. And what that meant was that Muslim majority countries were looking to either go towards socialism or just against the West, towards more economic populism and less Western control and interventionism. So the U.S. looked to fund any extremist Muslim political group that they could to fight the more progressive social reforming Muslim political groups, with which Afghanistan being a primary example with that video that we just watched from Vijay. But the U.S. did this everywhere. The U.S. did this all around the world. Any reactionary extremist group that they could find who were fighting against the progressives, the lefties, the socialists, the social reformers, the U.S. would give you arms and the U.S. would give you weapons. And years later, we invade all these countries to fight terrorism. I mean, it is just a sick joke. If you're looking for topics, you could go over the declining rate of profit and how it prevents economic development. Maybe at some point. Economics videos take a little bit longer to plan, but thank you for all you do, Eddie. You've been making my brain juices flow pretty rapidly for the past month as I'm waking up. River Valley Runner. Oh, are you from River Valley, Wisconsin? I'm glad I can help you get your brain juices flowing. We do what we can over here. Thanks for the book recommendation for sure. Ditto on the book recommendations. Nice. People ask for book recommendations all the time, and where I always point them is a couple videos. One video, which is outdated, and I do need to redo actually, because my step-by-step guide to understanding Marxism has things that I wouldn't recommend anymore. At least not in a step-by-step guide. But for one, we have an online library at Midwestern Marx. So if you're looking for any books that Carlos and I recommend, they're pretty much all here. And here we have links to PDFs where you can just read these online. So this is on MidwesternMarx.com in the online library section. Just post it in here for all y'all to see in case you want. Check that out. And you can't navigate to our website on your own. But then here's another one that people should check out. And this is the one that's outdated. But Eddie Lager's Step-by-Step Guide to Understanding Marxism. This is still me giving a step-by-step guide of the books that you should read, even though I would change it now. The one I would change probably is this one, The Divide. It just happened to be one of the first books that I read when I was understanding imperialism and how imperialism is an economic phenomenon, not just a political phenomenon, and how banks and other corporations basically underdeveloped Latin America and Africa. But I mean, there are better books from actual Marxists that you can read about this kind of stuff. And Jason Hickel has written some sort of anarchistic environmentalist stuff about degrowth, which I think is opposed to eco-socialism, and is more Malthusian. So he's a little more, I guess, liberal than I would like, but I don't know. The book is still good, so you can definitely still read it. I just wouldn't have it as my number one book you should read first anymore. And then we got Mao Zedong on contradictions, so you can understand dialectics. That would still be in any step-by-step guide to understanding Marxism video I made today. Dialectical and historical materialism. I would probably, maybe I did lump that one and on contradiction together, but nowadays that's definitely what I would do. Lump those two together because they're both explanations of dialectics that were written for working class people and peasants to understand. So they're fairly simple, but pretty on the money. Origins of Family, Private Property, and the State. Yeah, I still recommend this one a lot. It's not a must read, honestly, but you do see Engels applying dialectical materialism to anthropology, and it's pretty interesting. And this was one of the best-selling Marxist texts when it was released as far as being popular with people, because it talks about how the family form developed, how private property and the state originated, and lets you really get a handle on what the Marxist method is. So I like that one, and I'm working on finishing our YouTube book summary and review of this one, but we did this for our Patreon book club once, which I think was a hit, a success. What else we got? Value, price, and profit, wage, labor, and capital, definitely a good for basic economics. The Manifesto, sure. Is that State and Revolution? Yes, definitely. Gotta read it. Reform and Revolution, man, sure. I would probably recommend a different Luxembourg or a different if I would probably recommend Reform or Revolution is good. I would still recommend that. I would also add something about proletarian feminism though. And socialist feminism versus liberal feminism. Luxembourg, maybe think of that. Utopian and Scientific, definitely. Imperialism, the highest stage, definitely. Yeah. That's not a bad list. Maybe I don't need to redo it. Not terrible. Never mind, he just answered. What did I answer? Have you looked into twin rabbits? I have not. I didn't read all these comments. I thought I did. Sorry. Super dope to hear about the GNOME intro, Eddie. Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. The Biden administration, I'm sure that's even more exciting for you, Manny, because you just read a Noam Chomsky text. But the Biden administration has deported 2.4 million people as of March 2022, according to United We Dream. Trump didn't even deport 1 million during his whole presidency, according to Washington Post. Stuff's crazy, man. It is crazy when you see these statistics. Or when Democrats try and tell you that Biden isn't putting kids in cages anymore, he's putting them in high security detention facilities. Okay, so we're just changing the name. I mean, in almost anything, I think he enacted some things to end child separation at the border, but in almost everything he's been worse than Trump. And Build Back Better is supported by most of the unions and the workers. I mean, it's better than nothing. $10,000 off of student debt is basically a bribe to students and the professional managerial class to vote for him. But it's still better than nothing. But I mean, ultimately, those things are made because his approval rating is low, or those things are enacted because his approval rating is low. And the unions, the workers, the students, the people who are usually the base of the Democratic Party are saying, we're not going to vote for you. We're not going to vote for you if you don't do anything for us, if you keep sending our tax dollars to Ukraine. And they're trying to say, oh, just unite behind President Biden. He canceled a tiny bit of your student debt after promising to cancel all of it. And, he's uniting the country in this war against big, bad, evil Russia. Just support him. And people are saying, no, So he's forced to do some things for the people to try and basically bribe them to vote for him and avoid an electoral disaster for the Dems. But I would say don't give in, don't vote for him, and keep demanding stuff. Keep pointing out that there's still people, that they're still deporting people. Or I did a video last week. These Republican governors are doing these political stunts, like sending a bunch of immigrants like props to Martha's Vineyard because they're like, haha, this is a majority Democrat place. Let's send a bunch of immigrants. And then the Democrats freak out and put these places on high security, and the welfare social safety nets of these cities and of these towns are stretched to their limits as they try and take these migrants. And it's all just a big political stunt for the Republicans. And the Democrats gasp and say, oh, how evil they are. When the refugees that Ron DeSantis sent to Martha's Vineyard or somewhere else were from Venezuela. They were Venezuelan refugees. And Ron DeSantis approved Biden's new sanctions on Venezuela. His increased sanction regime trying to starve the Venezuelan people and destroy their economy. That's heavily supported by both Republicans and Democrats. So you starve this country, you starve these people, and then if they flee, when they flee to the U.S., you act like all of the American working class's problems are a result of these migrants and immigrants, and you kidnap them and use them for a political stunt. And these buses carrying the immigrants were paid for by tax dollars. Of course, the rich would never pay for anything. It's got to be siphoned from the paychecks of the working class. So that Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott, or whatever the hell his name is, the Texas guy, can make the Democrats seem like real jerks because they don't care about these immigrants. You're both jerks. You're both creating the migrants by starving and bombing other countries with our tax dollars. And then when they come here, you're using our tax dollars to deport them, lock them in cages, or ship them around the country on buses as part of this moronic political circus between two political parties who serve finance capital and who serve the imperialists. I mean, is it not obvious to everyone that that's what's going on here? Come on, people, wake up. Wake up, people. Quit letting them use your tax dollars to send refugees whose homes we bombed to Martha's Vineyard. Nobody wants this. The Republicans and Fox News continue to cover for their fellow corporate party by never mentioning how many people Biden has deported in comparison to Trump. It's a good point. I haven't even seen that on Fox News. Fox and CNN and MSNBC, these imperialists have found a lot of crossover lately. They always seem to do that when the U.S. is doing a proxy war or some regime change effort, like what they're doing against Russia. The funniest thing, I don't know if people understand how ridiculous it is. I don't know if people really grasp it. How CNN and MSNBC have made Liz Cheney a hero of the Democratic Party. Just because Liz Cheney is anti-Trump and anti-January 6th and won't say that the election was stolen by mules or whatever, because she's not that kind of Republican anymore. CNN and MSNBC love her because that's all you have to do. You have to say, no, Donald Trump is not a good guy and the election wasn't stolen by mules. And then CNN and MSNBC will be like, wow. This is the kind of Republican we can respect. The kind of Republican who will invade the country of Iraq and justify the murder of millions of people to make money for weapons contractors and oil companies, but then won't tweet mean things about it and won't rock the boat too much and will lead with civility and decorum. I mean, really, Liz Cheney, the daughter of Dick Cheney, the guy who invaded Iraq for Halliburton and the oil companies, a war that even CNN now admits was for oil. Even CNN, who helped lie the American public into the crime of the century, as Noam Chomsky calls it, the Iraq War, even they now admit this was for oil. Sorry, guys, we're sorry. There were no weapons of mass destruction. The U.S. was torturing people to get that information that we repeated. We repeatedly lied and lied and lied to justify this intervention, and it was all for oil. It was for oil and making profits for people that make weapons and sell them to the government. We're sorry. Okay, we're sorry. But we're going to give a primetime slot to Liz Cheney, the daughter of the person who invaded Iraq for oil. We've learned our lesson, though, okay? We've learned our lesson. But she's one of the good ones. She's a good Republican. She's reformed. She doesn't tweet mean stuff like Donald Trump. Trust us. Actually, let's vote for Liz Cheney. Robert Reich, somebody who actually used to, well, I mean, I'm sure he still criticizes inequality and used to criticize capitalism, but got totally swept up by the Russiagate nonsense and Trump derangement syndrome. Wrote an article arguing that Liz Cheney should be, or that we should support Liz Cheney for president. So I'm kind of tripping over my words there. But he's done so many fluff pieces in support of Liz Cheney, including one, prompting her to run for president. This is somebody I used to follow for his geopolitical analysis because I thought he was on the left. Because he would criticize the oligarchs and Silicon Valley and Wall Street and London and the giant banks. But then he supports someone like the child of the military-industrial complex. One of the most evil, warmongering, imperialist politicians of all time, Dick Cheney. Someone who was directly connected to Halliburton and the military-industrial complex, as well as the oil companies who profited off the Iraq War, which killed millions of people. And this is who the Democrats love now. This is their hero. She's pro-war and anti-Trump, and that's all the Democrats are. That's all they care about, all you got to be. Love war and hate Trump. Ron the Anarchist dropped a short video on his channel about the recent 1.6 windfall to the Repubs. Is that significant or just a drop in the bucket? What does 1.6 windfall mean? Is that the Republican mean more people are Republican or more people are not? I don't know if that's significant. I tried to pay attention to that stuff when I was getting my major in political science, all the technical details, the statistics that go into polling and predicting elections, but it just wasn't my main focus. Wasn't what I wanted to go in at all. Wasn't what I wanted to study at all. So people are freaking good at that stuff, though. People who are good with numbers and understanding demographics. What up, comrade? What up, Mauricio? Let's see, I got a couple videos here on the back burner that I've been meaning to watch.
Have had their money trapped.
Oh, we already watched this anti-China video called China's Plan for Domination. World domination.
All right, so Jeffrey Epstein.
I did want to watch this, kind of. I don't know. I don't know if I want to start talking about Jeffrey Epstein on this channel, because then I feel like we have to cover it a lot. But it is weird how many of these billionaires are connected to Epstein, including King Charles. So Alan Dershowitz has been one of my least favorite figures in politics in the world ever since I found out who he was. He's a lawyer and professor of law at Harvard, I believe, or Yale. And for those who don't know, I mean, I'm sure most of you do know, but NGO, pro-war NGOs and pro-war think tank people, State Department officials, imperialists, really, or, people, U.S. puppet dictators who they plan to put in power somewhere, like Syngman Rhee, the fascist who they put in power in South Korea. A lot of these people come from the Ivy League schools, Yale, Harvard, other institutions that receive a lot of money from the Koch brothers and various other corporate interests. These schools train up the future executives and runners, people who run the American empire and the American intelligence agency. So that's where Alan Dershowitz has taught for his whole life. He was caught on Jeffrey Epstein's flight logs or whatever else, caught being connected to Epstein, but he's got a giant ego, and he still thinks he's the best person in the world. He's God's gift to everyone. So yeah, let's check out him getting called out. It should be hilarious.
Jeffrey Epstein, excuse me. Alan Dershowitz, who was friends with Jeffrey Epstein, he went on The Hill. He went on the show Rising, and I think Ryan Grimm and the other hosts here actually do a very good job holding him accountable for his story, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. The guy was, basically caught red-handed, palling around with Epstein, long history with Epstein, super questionable circumstances. And, they're gonna bring it up to his face, which is, it's a very uncomfortable thing. It's unsettling, but I think they handled it pretty well. And Dershowitz kind of has a meltdown. So let's go ahead and watch.
I haven't heard you respond directly to this, and I wanted to give you a chance. There's in the travel records, it says on December.
I love that framing. I wanted to give you a chance, as if Ryan's doing him like a favor, bringing up all the past grotesque allegations against him, right?
11th, 2000, the Epstein plane leaves Florida for New York City. You're living in New York at the time. Then on the next day, December 12th, the calendar says a 1:30 meeting with, quote, Jeff. We don't know what Jeff that is. People can speculate. And then at 12.
Jeffrey Dahmer. It's either Dahmer or Epstein.
On December 13th, the next day, it says 10 a.m., scheduled a massage with AD, presumably Alan Dershowitz. 14th, the plane leaves.
That was in my wife's calendar. My wife scheduled a massage. If you think my wife scheduled a massage with an underage sex slave, then you'll believe anything.
And if you've seen the Netflix documentary about Epstein and his flight logs and the people who were on them, there were people who were indirectly connected to Epstein, people like Trump who had a picture of him, or people like Bill Gates who shared a flight with Epstein at one point or went to his island. But then there's people like Alan Dershowitz, people who texted Epstein and were scheduling things like a massage. People who there was much stronger evidence. It's sketchy that anybody would be in this sort of ruling, very rich, wealthy bourgeois class would be connected to this guy Epstein. But with Alan Dershowitz, he was pretty much caught red-handed, which is why I think you see him immediately getting angry and freaking. If you believe that, you'll believe anything. Okay, buddy. Well, I'm not on Jeffrey Epstein's flight log. I never texted Jeffrey Epstein and asked for a massage. So it seems a little weird to me. I don't know, though.
I don't even think it was in your wife's calendar. I think that's untrue. That's my opinion on the matter. I don't even think it's in your wife's calendar. So from the very premise, I disagree with Alan Dershowitz here. It's a super sketchy argument.
No,
other calendar entries.
Let me finish.
And someone says, Where Pilgrim says, why does Dershowitz do this to himself, LOL? I don't know. It's just the arrogance and the individualism of bourgeois culture and of American liberals, especially American liberals who have been, important people in the ruling class for a long time, like Alan Dershowitz. He just can't help it. He has to come out here and try and clear his name because his reputation and his individualism and his social status is everything to him. And he was caught red-handed asking Jeffrey Epstein, a serial pedophile, and someone who helped, his wealthy investor friends do the same thing. He was caught red-handed asking that guy for a massage. So now he just has to do all these media tours trying to convince everyone that I'm this upstanding guy. You should look up to me. And if anybody challenges me, I'm going to have a freaking hissy fit.
Let me finish. Let me finish.
Clarify that other calendar entries had a collective.
Let me finish.
Go ahead.
I was a visiting scholar at NYU. My wife had.
Nobody cares about your credentials, bro. Nobody cares about your credentials. In fact, when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein, the more credentials you list, the sketchier it is. Because, you know, he was friends with all the elite of the elite.
It's all about his individualism, all about his profile. I taught at NYU and Harvard. I'm just going to say the names of a bunch of really prestigious schools. That means I'm a good guy and definitely not a wealthy pedophile.
It was like top level elites who were, you know, involved in some sketchy stuff, to say the least. Homeboy had dirt on he had a picture of Bill Clinton in his house wearing a dress. What? Excuse me, it was a painting, not a picture. But why would you have that painting? Why would you have that painting? He was buddy-buddy with Bill Clinton. Why would you have that? Why would you have that? What is going on there? How is it that he was friends with Israeli prime ministers? I mean, look, the allegations are he was either CIA or Mossad, which is like Israeli CIA. And I think there's certainly some evidence that points in that direction. And so he was getting dirt on all the different elites, particularly in the US, for obvious reasons.
Professional masseuse, we have checks, canceled checks proving that the massage occurred, when it occurred, who it occurred with, and I've had very, very few massages in my life.
Oh my God, dude. Oh, you're not helping your case, dog. You are not helping your case even a little bit, Alan.
One at Jeffrey Epstein's house by a middle-aged woman who gave me a shoulder and neck massage, which I hated. I called up my wife and complained about it immediately.
Who, me, bro? I didn't even like the massage, bro. It wasn't even a good massage. It was definitely a middle-aged woman.
And who gets a massage and calls and complains? Oh, that was so terrible. I hate massages. They're so relaxing. I'm Alan Dershowitz. And then as Kyle saying, well, but I wasn't even there. I didn't even get a massage. I'm not even I'm not a big massage guy. And I mean, even when I did get a massage at Jeffrey Epstein's house, yes, a serial pedophile. I didn't even like it. I called my wife and complained. I love my wife. Really love my wife. My adult wife who's over the age of 18. You know, and I get it looks a little sketchy, you know, when you're in Epstein's living room getting a massage, but I didn't even like it. It was a bad massage.
Woman, it was only neck and shoulder. That's it. That's all she touched. Only neck and shoulder. She didn't touch anywhere else. I'm just saying. I hated it too. I didn't even like it, bro. I didn't even like it. I never even get massages, bro. What's a massage?
Immediately. No, I've done nothing wrong. If you want to put me on trial here, you have to give me an opportunity to fully explain. You will not be.
That's what you're doing. You're still talking, aren't you?
Be able to make just charges against me without giving me an opportunity.
You had a massage at Jeffrey Epstein's house? Yeah, do you know who?
I love that interjection. Wait, you got a massage at Jeffrey Epstein's house, bro?
It was who performed that?
Yes. I mean, we know approximately who it was. There were a lot of people around.
We know approximately who it was? What does that mean? What does that? I know roughly who was touching me, bro. Roughly. Just got a general.
And you have a gazillion dollars. Just go get a massage from somewhere else. Go hire a professional masseuse. What reason is there to get a massage at Jeffrey Epstein's house when we know that rich people knew what Jeffrey Epstein was all about, what he was doing behind the scenes? Why would you ever go to that guy for a personal massage in his house? Just go to a masseuse. They have businesses where people will give you massages and they're regulated. And your money will actually go to working people instead of Jeffrey Epstein. Like, seriously, who do you expect to believe this, Alan Dershowitz? Yes, I got a massage in Jeffrey Epstein's house. But it was a bad massage. It was just neck and shoulders. And I don't know who it was. There were a lot of people there. Maybe we know approximately who it was, he says. But definitely an adult. This is so creepy, dude. I don't know how much more of this I can do.
Idea, know what I'm saying?
We think we remember, and the person who was in charge of the Epstein house confirmed this, that it's a woman named Olga who was in her 40s and was a professional massage therapist. I had a neck and back problem at the time, and I had a massage. My wife.
So let me get this straight. We all know what Jeffrey Epstein did, what he's accused of, what he's guilty of. And Dershowitz is saying, oh, yes, I knew Epstein. Yes, I was close with Epstein. Yes, I met with him all the time. Yes, I got a massage. But I got a legit massage. Whereas we know all the other massages.
Exactly what I was saying. Yeah, I think we get the gist there. It's so gross. It's so gross. And it's like the bourgeoisie, you know, we should be against them and support class struggle and revolution just because of imperialism and exploitation. Right? The fact that they have violently enforced their the dominance of finance capital all around the world, the dominance of capitalism, and the fact that they accumulate more and more and more wealth by exploiting the labor of the working majority of society. That'd be enough reason to overthrow the ruling class and the bourgeoisie. But now you got stuff like this. You know, now they're meeting on Jeffrey Epstein's island and forming these mass creepy sex rings where, you know, they're engaging in stuff that would be considered horrible by the vast majority of society and by the working masses of society. And, you know, using their infinite wealth to do so, probably because they're not satisfied from their wealth anymore, probably because they have everything and, you know, they have to do more and more immoral and morally decrepit shit in order to get off or whatever. Sort of like the show Squid Game, where you have all the rich people who are organizing, spoilers by the way, but rich people organizing the Squid Game because they're bored and don't have anything else to do. And then the older billionaire actually goes into the Squid Game and plays it because he's so bored. It's similar. It's like Epstein's Island. It's gross. So gross. All right, y'all. I think that's all for me today. We made it 2 hours. It was a great stream. If Carlos wants to go on later, maybe I'll be on later. If not, this has been a lot of fun. Send videos to the Midwestern Marks Reddit or the Midwestern Marks Discord if you want to see me react. Yeah, I don't know what else. Peace and love. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. Thanks, Ware Pilgrim. Thanks, State Fishing. Thanks, Innovican. Much love.